You're listening to Mind Over Markets, a podcast on trading psychology to help you build a bulletproof mindset. Here's your hosts, George Papazov and Mark Borscht.
In the brain, there's a lot of different parts, 5 main components or 5 areas of the whole brain that help you deal with fear. First one's the thalamus. And this piece of your brain is actually, it's in the core. It's in the middle. If you look at it, it's right in the center of the brain. All right, and it decides where to send incoming sensory data from your eyes, ears, mouth, skin, all your sensory points. All right, and then you have the sensory cortex, which interprets this data that you've received. So basically, your thalamus says, oh my God, I feel something that could be dangerous. Your sensory cortex takes that information and interprets it.
Yeah, by the way, guys, the sensory cortex is, just looking at the image, it's basically at the top in the middle of your head.
Yeah, and we'll post this image in the show notes so you can reference it. It's interesting to understand it. You know, we're going to talk about how it works in a moment, but it's interesting to understand the components, to understand the 5 different parts of your brain are responsible for identifying and reacting to fear and danger.
Yeah, these are the 5 parts of your brain essentially keeping you alive.
Exactly. It's a key function. And then the hippocampus stores and retrieves your conscious memories. So it processes the data in a context. All right. So if we work through the 3 so far, by the way, the hippocampus it's kind of like a U-shaped thing that goes around your hypothalamus. And we'll talk about that in a second. So think about this. Your thalamus decides, hey, there's some sensory data, sends it to the sensory cortex. It interprets the data, sends it to the hippocampus, which says, all right, what's the context of this information? Like, how do I feel threatened? Is it a situation where I should be threatened? And if it is a threatening situation, it sends it to the amygdala, which then decodes emotion and determines if it's a possible threat. And if it is a threat, what it's going to do is it triggers the hypothalamus to take action. And this is where the fight or flight response happens. So really, the amygdala is the key point, whether it determines, hey, do I release some kind of protective action, or is this something that I just need to store in a memory that isn't really dangerous to me? So we're going through this whole process for every single event. It's happening in the back of your brain. You're not consciously aware of this happening, but it's happening right now as you're driving, as you're listening. You know, can this podcast hurt me? It's coming through my ears. In the sensory cortex, it sends that info to the hippocampus. It puts it into context and says, last time I heard these 11 episodes, they haven't hurt me yet.
They haven't hurt, but they've made you money.
Yeah, exactly. They've helped me make money. So here's how the brain then creates fear. There's 2 paths of fear in our brain. This is really cool. So whatever the stimulus event might be, so it might be seeing a spider. It might be seeing somebody that looks threatening to you. It might be carrying some kind of object that's hurt you before. All right, there's something called the high road and the low road of fear. These are really cool. So the high road is a process that's determined by logic. So you have time to think about it. All right. So for an example, the high road part of it would be, let me give you an example in a trade context. I think that would help.
I would hope so.
Yeah. The high road goes like this. You're in a trade. You're down about $1,000 in this trade. Right. And you're about $100 away from your stop loss, where you've predetermined you're going to exit.
Daily stop?
Yeah. And the high road way to analyze it is the sensory cortex is sending you information saying, I could see visually that my trade is super close to getting my stop hit, which then makes the loss full and real. It crystallizes the loss.
Exactly. Crystallizes the loss. Exactly.
And then you're thinking, okay, so then now what can I do about this? Obviously not move the stop, but you start to think, what action do I have? Should I take one contract off and reduce my position? All right. How should I learn from this? You're thinking logically, rationally about what you could do. That's what you call the high road. The low road is you're down $10,000. Let's make it more dramatic. And your account balance is $11,000. And so in one day, right? It's crazy, but
sounds like somebody who hasn't been listening to the Mind Over Markets podcast.
Yeah. And the low road is, oh my God, let me short as many contracts as I have left to try to get out of this without even thinking about it. So a low road response to fear is you automatically and unconsciously taking action. It's the difference between the 2 I told you about. All right, the 2 where 1 I know is essential for my survival, and 2 I know is just a warning mechanism, but I'm not really going to get hurt. My survival isn't at risk here. And so those are the 2 responses. The high road one starts first in trading, the high road of fear, because you have exposure to fear in small amounts. If you start out sim trading, right, there isn't even too much that you're risking other than the loss of time that you're putting into this. But as you experience a little bit of fear slowly, and then you go live and you lose your first trade, it starts to feel more serious, right? And now you start to fear it even more. And so the next trade, even though you're afraid now of loss, you're putting yourself in the same circumstance that created the loss, and it heightens your fear even more. And you continue to do this cycle of being afraid to trade, but not adjusting your plan, not thinking about your trading strategy, just going in there and thinking you're just going to lay on some contracts and it's going to work out miraculously. And then you get served the loss again and again and again. And guess what happens? Now you take a high road logical fear and you turn it into a low road amygdala response. The one that says, oh my God, your survival is at stake. All right.
Yeah,
and once you do that, I don't want to use this word, but you're pretty close to being screwed in trading unless you get help. So you're going to blow out accounts. You're going to lose all your money once you associate what you're doing in trading to a potential of loss of capital so significant it affects your survival or your quality of life.
Exactly. And the worst part about it is you won't really know why, right? Again, you won't really know why unless you've done the psychological work required to know why this is happening, right? So hopefully you guys are starting to see the importance of psychology in trading and performance as well, because this is the game changer. This is the holy grail, guys.
And another thing too is we could look at fear as well with values, right? We could compare what fear is with value. So let's talk about the value, for example. First of all, like we said, fear occurs when you're in danger of something. So what is the danger? Losing money to some people is more dangerous than others. You know, ironically enough, to the person who hasn't had money in their life and has made it, they tend to be afraid of loss more than the people who have had it. And and that's a very blanket statement, but if you break it down, it goes down to your value. What do you value? Remember in episode 3, when we elicited Mark's values, I don't remember what they were. I'm sure I could flip a couple pages, but he was trading for the goal of making money, but joy and fulfillment, I think, were higher up than the actual financial gain.
Yeah, I think money was the last one. I
Right.
think it was my 7th or 8th one.
And so let's say your top value is safety or security. A lot of people they have that top value as safety, security. And the reason is, that there's some unfortunate situations where people haven't had much. Remember, my parents immigrated. You guys are probably by the time this podcast is out, hopefully picked up a copy of the book, Path to Profit. And the first chapter, I tell you guys, when my parents immigrated to Canada, I slept on the bench of the Pearson Arrivals Terminal. I thought it was exciting. I don't know how my parents felt. I honestly don't. I should have asked them. But I would imagine they felt scared because everything they had, they gave up. Now, they're the Arrivals Terminal of a foreign country for the first time. So for me, that was excitement. But if your top value is safety, if all your life you've been taught by your parents, especially at a young age, don't take risk. Take the safe route. If you have a job, you work there till retirement. You'll get to enjoy your retirement. Don't run in there and get the ball. Oh my gosh, careful running. Run slow. You don't want to get there too fast because then you'll be a professional athlete. Like if you've been told by your parents to protect yourself and avoid danger, safety will be your top value.
I think, yeah. And I think especially as it relates to trading, little things growing up, such as, your parents telling you money doesn't grow on trees, little thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be with your survival, as far as having security and safety as your top value. But you'll also have people in those kinds of situations. That's like myself. My parents came over from Europe. Obviously, I wasn't born at the time, so I don't have the same kind of experience that George has arriving in Pearson. But they grew. They came to Canada, built a life for themselves, and obviously, we didn't come from a wealthy background, so they built everything up. And growing up, that's a lot of what I was hearing was, money doesn't grow on trees. You have to work for money, et cetera, et cetera. And so just because it's not necessarily something to do with my actual survival. Little things like that can also lead to, you valuing or trying to hold on to or hoard any money that you come across. And that can also affect your trading, because if you're hoarding, or if you're scared to use your money or to risk your money, then that's also, one of your top values would also be considered safety and security.
Thanks for listening to the Mind Over Market podcast. You can find us at tradeproacademy.com.